welcome to Darvanalee Design Studio. My name's Nicole Reed, and today we're going to do this cute little project of a pin cushion with a matching thread catcher that's removable so you can empty it. So let's get started. Okay, so today we're making the Pin Pal Pincushion, and there's just a few things that you're going to need. You're going to need your fabrics for your pin cushion and for the lining of the basket and the outer. You're also going to need some fabric for your loops, and for all my loops I'm actually putting Shape Flex 101 on that, as well as the pin cushion and the lining of the basket. And the outer part of the basket I'm actually going to put some fusible fleece on it. Now the pattern actually doesn't call for that, but I'm doing that because the fusible fleece that I've got is not as thick as I would like it to be, so I'm just adding some extra stability by putting the Shape Flex 101 on it. You're also going to need a rotary cutter, some thread snips, some matching thread, some hand needles because we need to sew on some buttons. You're going to need some toy fill. You're going to need some pins, and most importantly you're going to need some rulers and also the pattern. Now the pattern I will link up where you can get that from down below this video. I'm not going to be giving any measurements today, that is all included in the pattern. I'm just going to show you how I quickly put this together. So we're going to get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take all our fabrics and we're going to put all our inner facings on. So I've got my iron all heating up, and I'm just going to grab my Shape Flex 101 and I'm going to start with the loops, and I'm going to lay it with the rough side of the Shape Flex facing up, and then I'm just going to lay my fabric that I've cut for the loops on top, wrong sides down to the rough side of the inner facing, and with my iron on a cotton setting I'm just going to place that on there and adhere that to the back. And I'm going to repeat that with everything that needs fusible fleece or the inner facing on it. And then I'll just set them aside as I've done them. Okay, so we've fused everything onto the basket, the waste basket lining and the outer. We've also done it onto the pin cushion and the loops. So we're going to get ready to do the assembly now. So I'm going to start with the basket. So basically what we're going to do is we're just going to cut out some notches out of the bottom of each of these corners on both the lining pieces and on both of the outer of the fabric. And it is a just a little square that we cut out. So I'm just going to grab my ruler. Same on the other side as well, to repeat for this one as well, and then the same for these ones. And because I'm using a darker fabric it's a little bit harder to see, so I just line it up on the edge of the fabric on the back, and then that way I can see it where I've got to cut. Repeat for the other one as well, the same thing. And just remembering that you're lining up with the edge of the fabric, not the edge of the inner facing. And you can see there I've just been using some scraps, and these were almost big enough for this particular project, and it's still doing exactly the same thing that it would, and it's just the 1/4 inch seam allowance that I've missed a little bit, so it doesn't make any difference. Alright, so now I'll just grab my scissors, and then basically you got to just cut along that line. I just find it easier to use scissors than it is to use the rotary cutter on such a small project. And you repeat with all the rest. Okay, so they're all done. So now what you're going to do is you're going to place them right sides together. And we're going to start with the outer of the bag, and you're going to sew 1/4 inch down here and 1/4 inch along here, and then I'll show you how to box it up. And for the lining you're going to do the same thing, except you're going to leave a little opening to turn it in the right way. So pin that all together. And just remembering to start sewing here where you've made the marks in the lining and reverse at each stop, leaving that gap so we can turn it in the right way. And with the outer of the outer part of the waist basket, you're going to sew down here 1/4 inch, and you're going to sew right across here and not leave an opening for this one because this is the outside of the bag. Okay, so we've sewn them together. You can see there I've used 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that has basically got a little gap down the bottom so I can turn that through. So now what we've got to do is box up our corners. So we just take our opening and we line up our 2 seams, so you can see that there. We just line those seams up. We get that sitting nice and flat, and we grab a pin and pop that in there, making sure everything's still lining up. You can see there that that's going to sit like a little box. And then basically what we do there from there is we go over to the sewing machine and we start here a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we do a reverse and finish with a reverse here, and you repeat that onto the other side as well, and repeat for the outer part of your little waist basket. Now with the fusible fleece on this one, or your wadding that you might be using, just make sure that your seams are nesting quite nicely and don't have them going the same way. So you can see there it's just one seam's going this way and one seam's going that way, and that'll just reduce some of the bulk for you. And again, this is going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance as well, just straight across here. Okay, so we've sewn those together, and now we're going to assemble our bag. So leaving your outside of your bag the wrong way out, you want to turn your lining right way out, and then you just want to sit them in each other, lining up your seams on your side seams. Okay, just grab some wonder clips if you've got some. If not, just use some pins. And again, lining up your side seams. I find that's the easiest place to start, is at the side. And then you just go around making sure that it all fits into one another. Just grab some pins. Pin that all the way around. As I said, making sure that your side seams are aligning. If they're off a little bit, that's okay. Like it's no real big deal. It's just a little waste, and no one's going to be that picky. Okay. I find it easier just to use the wonder clips on the side because it's a little bit bulky with the seams and the wadding and all the fusible fleece, whatever you've used. So just make it nice and easy for yourself. So now what we're going to do is we're going to head to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch 1/4 inch all the way around, and then we'll turn it right way out, and then we'll top stitch it. Okay, so we've sewn all the way around. Now we'll turn it right way out, and we do that by just going into our lining and that little opening that we left. Okay, so now basically what we do is we just turn that right way out, and we're going to press that all down. Now you can roll it so you end up with like a fake binding type scenario on it, or you can roll it all the way in so it's like that, but I'm going to just leave a little cuff on that today. And going to give it a really good press and get all those corners out. And the closing of my the little opening that we left, I'll probably just top stitch that closed. If not, I'll hand sew that closed. That's entirely up to you, whatever you want to do. First I need to get rid of some of my scraggly little threads. But I just put a pin in that to remind me that I've got to close that up. Actually, that's a bit big, that one. Okay, so now I'm going to give this a really good press. And then I'm going to just stitch in the ditch along here, and that will be the little waste basket done. And then we'll move on to the pin cushion and the loops. Okay, so that's all done now, so we can set that aside. And next we're going to move on to making our loops. So you've got 3 loops. One's for the top of the pin cushion, and 2 are for the buttons to hold the waste basket to the pin cushion, so it just sort of sits off the edge of your desk. So as I said, we've finished our waste basket, so that can get set aside. We don't need to do anything more to that now. And now we'll make our loops. So basically what you're going to do is just give it a press, fold it in half, open it back up, and then you're going to take your raw edges into that center crease line. Now if you've got a clapper, use that. It makes a nice good crease and it won't open up on you again, and it'll make it a lot easier to sew. And then repeat with the opposite side, and then fold it onto itself like so. And then you're just going to stitch down the long edge to hold that together. Okay, so just like that. And then we're going to take them to all of them. Once we've finished doing this to all of them, we'll take them to the sewing machine, and on the long edge sew 1/8 of an inch down one side and 1/8 of an inch down the other side, and then they'll be ready to put into our pin cushion. Okay, so now what we're going to do is that we're going to assemble our pin cushion. So take your 2 pieces of fabric that you've cut out for your pin cushion, and then you're going to get one of your loops. Now I'm using 2 different colors for my loops, so I know that this is the one that's going to be at the top of the pin cushion. So just like this, and you're going to sit it just like that. About 1/4 of an inch to 3/4 of an inch away from the corner there. Just pop it a little wonder clip on that, and then you're going to get your, these are your button ones, and you're going to do the same thing with those. And this is all explained in the pattern really well. You're going to make them into loops like that away from this edge here, and you're going to come in and you're going to place them just there. Grab a wonder clip, and you do the same with the other side. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are actually going to put them right sides together, and then I'm going to mark where I've got to sew, so I know to leave this bottom edge open. We don't sew this bottom edge. Okay, so place them right sides together, and you will have to use some pins to hold it in place. Now on this side here, you're actually going to leave a gap about 2.5 inches. So you're going to leave that gap there, and then you're going to stitch all the way around just where I'm marking, back stitching here, and you're going to stitch this part too. So back stitching at the beginning and back stitching there where those 2 crosses are. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to stitch from here to here, then jump and stitch all the way around, leaving this bottom edge open. Okay, so you can see there that I've got a little gap here and the bottom end is still open. So we can remove our pins now. You don't want to remove your wonder clips from the bottom because they're still being held in. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to create our pin cushion. So you've got this opening at the bottom. You're going to grab it at the sides and you're going to line your seams up and making sure that they nest. And then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across, reversing at the beginning and the end. That just for some added security. So grab a pin and nest those seams together. And then just using your wonder clips where those tabs are, you can just line that up, pop them on. And now we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance across there. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is just trim off that excess from the corners, being careful not to cut into my stitches. And trim away any excess up near the loop as well. There we go, and we go to our little gap that we left earlier and we can turn that the right way in now. Now the one thing I didn't mention is where the loops are, where the buttons go on, these bottom ones, I actually reversed across those too, just for that little bit of added strength, because they are going on and off the buttons as you empty your little waste basket. So just be mindful of that when you come to them, and just take it slow because they are a little bit thick to go through, so you don't want to break a needle coming up to it or anything like that. So you can see there that that's the start of our pincushion. So now what we've got to do is fill it. So on the back side of it, we've got that gap there. Okay, now the one thing that it doesn't mention on the things that you need for this, it just suggests on the inside of the pattern that you could add some walnut shells or something with a bit like some beads or something like that, just with a little bit of weight in it. For me, I don't have anything like that on hand at the moment, so I'm just going to use rice. And I've got a cup of rice here, and I probably won't put that much in, but we'll see how we go. That's about 1/2 cup, and I think that that will be enough weight to it. Actually, it probably need a little bit more, so probably about 3/4 cup I've put in. Yep, that's much better. So yeah, I've put 3/4 cup in, and now what I need to do is get the wadding and stuff our pincushion. So I just get little bits at a time because we've only got a little bit of a hole there, and this is just toy fill that I'm putting in this. And I just use my thumbs to stuff that in there. And I keep going until it's nice and firm. And these are great little gifts for your sewing friends. You know, I mean, we've all got lots of machines, and well, I know I have. I've got quite a few different machines. So I've got an embroidery machine. I have a vintage machine that I make my handbags on, and then I've just got my regular everyday sewer, and so I like to have these sitting beside them, and then that way I know I've always got a pin cushion and a waste basket there. So you can see there that it's nice and firm, and all I do is just sort of shake that around after it's sealed up, and the rice will go to the bottom where my hand is sitting. And that seems to be sitting there pretty good right now, so you can see there that it's just sitting nicely. Probably could do with a little bit more towards the top just there. Alright, so that's looking nice and smooth and not lumpy or anything like that. So we're just about ready to sew that up now. So what I do is I push all the wadding away, and I just get my seam allowance, which is really easy to pinch together. And then I just grab a pin and I pop that in there like so. It's a little bit tricky, and that'll just hold it in place for me, and then I can just do a ladder stitch or whip stitch, whatever you're comfortable with. And you can see there that the wadding's going down into the corners, which is really good, and it's firm but not overfilled, so that's what you want to go for. Okay, so next we're going to need our buttons. And our thread and needle, And I always just bring the thread, I thread the needle and bring the end of the thread down to the bottom of the thread, so it just gives it that extra strength of 2 threads. And tie a knot in the end of it. Trim off our little tail. And lining our 2 edges up, and I come in from the seam here out into the crease of the fabric. Give that a bit of a tug and that will disappear. Making sure that all your raw edges are tucked in. And I'll just come up a bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just coming into the crease of my seam, and then I come across over here, just down a little bit, and you can see that it just disappears into the seam there, and it's just closing that up. Don't know if you can see it or not. We'll get that a bit closer. So I'm just pinching the seams closed. So I come across here and then back across onto the opposite side, and you can just see it's just closing it, and it's almost invisible, like you can't I've probably taken a couple of little big bites there, but you just want to take some little bites coming out into that crease. And then into the opposite side, again into that crease, and that just pulls it close, and you continue doing that until it's finished, and then we'll sew the buttons on. So you can see there I've got to the end now, and I'm just going to knot that off, but you can barely see that stitching. So that's how I close off my any gaps that I've got to do in any of these sort of pin cushions or in the bottom of your bags, and as time goes on you do get better at it. And then to knot it off, I just come back up and across, and then I just make a little knot, and as this is going to be pushed and poked and all the rest of it because it's a pin cushion, I'll just do 2 knots on that one, and then I just bury that. And that all I do for burying is I go in and I come out over here, and I snip that off as close to the fabric as I can get, and then just give it a bit of a rub, and that'll disappear in there, and then there's no tail. Get rid of everything else, and that's our pin cushion all sewn up. So now what you want to do is get your basket, and we're going to sew the buttons on the inside of the basket. Okay, and I just get my either if you don't have a marking tool or anything like that, you can actually use your pins. So basically I just sit my pin cushion like that, and then I just place my basket, and then I put a pin in there and a pin there, and that's where my buttons have to go, and then I just sew my buttons on as I normally would. So once you've sewn it on, just check that it is nice and secure, and then you can possibly knot it off. I'll probably go a couple more times on this one, and then you just repeat for the other side. Okay, so that's all sewn on, and we just tie a knot off in the back, and that's it. We are finished. Snip your threads off, and then you can just add your little basket to your tab, hooks under your button like so, and you repeat with the other side, and then it just sits nice and tidy beside your sewing machine, just like so. Well, thank you very much for joining us today making the Pin Pal Pincushion and Thread Catcher. I hope you really enjoyed our little tutorial. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up down below, share it with your crafty friends, and hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon beside it, and that way you won't miss out on any future posts. My name's Nicole Reed for Darvanalee Design Studio. Thank you very much for joining me, everybody, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye for now.